Hello, I'm Civil Rights Attorney Carol Powell Lexing, and welcome to the Carol Powell Lexing Show, a show that allows you to connect the pertinent legal issues affecting you, your community, and the country. And today we're going to be talking about a very needed discussion, or having a very needed discussion regarding sex trafficking versus pimping. And here to help facilitate that discussion will be Investigator Chandra R. Cleveland. But before we get started, we always like to do an affirmation. And my favorite affirmation is, you are beautifully, wonderfully, and marvelously made. And having said that, that means that you are not made to be abused, to be misused, to be exploited. And today we're going to be talking about crimes of exploitation. We're going to talk about sex trafficking versus pimping, human rights trafficking. I mean, our topic is very hot. One is very needed to be discussed, a discussion that somehow is being overlooked. And here today to help facilitate the discussion is Investigator Chandra Cleveland. Welcome, Chandra. Why don't you tell us?
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Tell us a little something about yourself, because we're going to be on a very hot topic that's been under-discussed, for lack of a better word.
Okay, well, I am a licensed private investigator and a certified human trafficking investigator. I started my career almost 40 years ago now.
Wow.
I started in 1989 with law enforcement, and I served 23 years there. And then I started my own PI firm and bodyguard service in 2006. And it is still going yet today. I have rescued over 142 now victims from whether they were lured away from their homes or whether they were missing. I have rescued them and brought them back home. I work crimes against women and girls. The name of my company is She Private Investigations and Security Consultants Group. And it's called a group because I have different facets of people a part of She. And She stands for See Her Empowered. And the group consists of caseworkers, attorneys, other private investigators, male or female, just as long as we're concentrating for the same cause, and that is to rescue or either provide protection or justice for a woman or girl. So that's about it right now. I have 5 cases where that I'm working right now that I don't have the bodies of the women. It seems like this is becoming a trend of men getting rid of the women's bodies. So I also teach self-defense, and I train women on what to look for in relationships that may not be healthy for you.
Wow. Let me just ask, how did you get involved in this type of work? What motivated you to get involved in this type of work?
Well, I was a professional model since age 9. And I came back to South Carolina to help my mother. She had some medical issues, and I decided to come back home. And while I was staying in a hotel just before I moved back, a deputy sheriff was there, and I was telling him I needed to move back home and I needed to look for a job. And did he know where I can get work? And he was like, "Oh, the sheriff department is hiring. We can," and he was like, "Oh, no, you would never be able to do that. So never mind." And I was like, excuse me. So from there, I got the application. I became the first female to be Officer of the Year for the state of South Carolina. I became the youngest internal affairs inspector for the largest police department. And then I became the first female to open a security company in the state of South Carolina and bodyguard service, and only 100% as a female.
That's very impressive. Well, I see what your interest in getting involved and helping. You basically committed to helping women and girls get out of this type of situation dealing with sex trafficking. Can you tell me what the definition of sex trafficking is? Because, in my mind, let me just tell you, in my mind, I think of sex trafficking as being victims locked in a room or in the back of a truck like you see off of TV, and then someone takes you and sells that victim for sex. But it's more to it than that. There are different dynamics and aspects of sex trafficking. And just kind of help me with that.
Well, sex trafficking is when someone takes I would say, their whole body and mind of a young person under the age of 18, make them false promises and sell them for commercial sex. That's exactly what sex trafficking is.
Then when you say commercial sex, what do you mean by that?
Commercial sex means that they have an operation that they're set up to sell women and girls by whatever means necessary, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, a day, just sell them outright. It's whatever it may be. And when you said a few moments ago that what is sex trafficking? Do you have to be taken away, lured, or whatever?
Right.
No, it's none of that. Sex trafficking is when someone use coercion, fraud, are things that a kid is looking for to get out of their home in order to lure them away from their home and end up abusing them.
Right. Now, I guess with sex, in our discussion today, you have sex trafficking with minors, and then you're going to have sex trafficking with people that are not minors, adults. And I guess the difference will come into play because there is a statute that was implemented, I think, back in 2020, the Trafficking and Violence Protection Act. And it clearly defines basically pretty much that sex trafficking is a federal statute. And because it is a federal statute, it says that anything harboring, transporting, obtaining, holding people, whether you are under 18 or not, is considered sex trafficking. And I guess that leads into our discussion with, we've all seen these stories about Sean P. Diddy Combs, R. Kelly, and basically someone from your hometown named, what is his name? Jason Rogers Pope, better known as DJ Kid.
Kid.
I mean, his story, that situation involving DJ Kid is really unbelievable because he has been sentenced for sex trafficking with over 600, close to 700 Black young girls, Black minor girls. And it's just unbelievable that we have this going on in the 21st century. You have like a slave trade going on here. And his situation kind of like it's a little different from P. Diddy's in a sense and R. Kelly's. So I guess the difference is dealing with this guy saying, what's his name, DJ Kid? He bragged about on the internet that he had basically enslaved these young girls for a 3-year period of time from 2017 to 2019. And, you know, he got sentenced last year for 19 years when, in fact, the statute itself says that you can get life imprisonment for sex trafficking. So how do you distinguish those 3 cases, starting with P. Diddy case? Because we saw the Homeland Security come in there and raid his home, and they treated him as public enemy number 1 because of alleged allegations of sex trafficking.
Yes. And, you know, the way they did P. Diddy's case, it was because they had a viable person who had been hooked to him through a Stockholm syndrome. The Stockholm syndrome is real. That's when a victim desires to be with someone who is hurting them. And so with the young lady who came forth and said that she was being sold to people and she could not leave him, she could not leave on her own, she did very well with collecting evidence in order to prove. So it will be no doubt whether she was telling the truth or not. She recorded things, she kept them, and she sent them to a private area of her own, not to anyone else. She saved those documents and recordings so that when she was ready to be free and she thought it was safe to leave, she did that and filed charges with a very good attorney so that she can make sure that it sticks. So with P. Diddy, he's doing something that many of these entertainers in the industry are doing. It's called sexual exploitation.
Wow.
And our young girls, when they see these rappers and all of that, and they go to these shows and someone say, would you like to come backstage? That's how they get them. They take them backstage, and then they say, do you want to come back to our hotel room? And they're back at the hotel room, and next thing you know, they thinking that they were going to be getting autographs and probably being hooked up with one person, and then end up being hooked up with several men at one time, and that wasn't their will. So after they leave there, they threaten them. They tell them, if you ever tell anyone, we're going to say it was you're the one who came in and said you wanted to do whatever. So those different situations have been going on for a long time. And during the time that I was in law enforcement and just when I got out, we've had several cases of young girls being sexually exploited by rappers or people within the music industry who said that they could come backstage and that they had a pretty voice and could they meet them at the hotel later. So it's a lot of manipulation going on in our system. We are the only people that are allowed to call women out their names. We are the only people who get a record deal because we're talking about sex and drugs and all of that. So it is something that definitely needs to change. And we as an African American community need to help put the brakes on that. And we need to have our men to stand accountable as well.
Right. Let me ask you this, getting back to the P. Diddy alleged situation. Are we talking about the young lady that stayed in a relationship with him for 10 years? Or are we talking about this young lady that has come forth that says she was a minor and she got flown to New York or what have you? Are we talking about the 10-year?
We're not talking about her. No, we're talking about Cassie. Who was there with him for several years. And that's what we're talking about.
And the reason I wanted to make that distinction is because you have a situation where you have a young lady and everybody is saying, well, you stayed there for 10 years, you reap the benefits of what this man is offering to you. How do you get to stay into a relationship for 10 years and you are being abused in that particular situation? So,
okay. Yeah. That's how everyone needs to know. And people who know him know that he is that man. He is that dangerous that if you leave him before he's ready to let you go, there are consequences for your action.
Now,
she played the game exactly right, where she was able to get away. And when the time was right and the evidence she collected will not be challenged under any circumstances, because she was there during the time that other girls brought these allegations forth and their families were paid off or the girl went missing and yet to be seen again. She lived those incidents. So she knew how to play her cards.
So you think the victims, they get caught up in these rewards that these men are offering them, and they get caught up in that, and then they can't get out of it. Do you think we're going to talk about, since we're talking about Peter, do you think specifically other victims' mentalities would be like, I can't get out of this? Because 10 years, that's a long time to allow somebody to misuse, abuse.
It's really not. It's really not a long time. And when you have parents that know where you are and think that you're in good hands, and that's a whole nother story that I always talk about. The parents are like, you better stay there, that man, and you're making money. He's sending us money each time, and you're going to get your career started. You've already been on television. He's doing good things for you. And when other people have you being manipulated where they don't know the circumstances of how bad things are for you. And that's what happens with young girls. They're there and they thought they were about to get something better, like a record deal or a movie deal, and then they get abused. They get treated like dogs. They defecate on them. They urinate on them. They make them do insulting things in front of other people.
Right.
So they go there for one thing, thinking they're going to get the high life and they're going to be living their best life. And then it turns into slavery,
sexual slavery. and they don't know how to get out because, I've seen people, I saw them on the red carpet. I would never imagine that this type of situation is going on with someone with someone that's considered an icon in the music industry. And
let me tell you, one thing you need to know about human trafficking is that victims it's very rarely that victims think they are a victim. So this is why sex trafficking is so hard to stop, because victims of human trafficking doesn't feel like they are a victim. So these young girls that are out there doing these things, they think they just have an older boyfriend. And since that older boyfriend treated them right for 6 months, bought them everything, it's only right for her to start selling herself so they can keep eating good, because that's exactly what he's telling her. You want to keep getting your hair done, your nails done, and eating where we want to eat, and you need to go sleep with this,
of that nature, huh? Being on the red carpet and, being a part of the celebrity world, you need to keep doing this. And so I guess it's kind of mind-boggling, because you would think that a person whose mentality is like that would not be a person of his statute. In fact, you would think it would be some pimp off the streets. That's why, I wanted to start talking about sex trafficking.
That's another misconception.
Right, that's a misconception, because, I was misconcepted about my reality about sex trafficking. Like I said earlier, I thought they had victims in a room and you're just selling them off. But in this particular case, you have victims that think that they are in some type of caring relationship with the trafficker, and that person really don't care anything about you. They just want to use and abuse and sell you. Now, in the case of P. Diddy's situation, Homeland Security was involved. Now, she was not a minor when it got started. I can see Homeland Security coming in mainly because...
She was a minor when she got started.
Oh, she was a minor when she got started?
Yeah.
Okay,
she started, I think it is a few days or a few weeks before her 17th birthday. And he said that he wanted to manage her.
Right, okay.
Not a relationship, that he wanted to manage her. That kind of turned into a morph into a so-called relationship. So now I understand why Homeland Security was involved. Because anytime you have... Well, no, Homeland Security was involved because this took place in multiple
jurisdictions.
Multiple states.
Right.
And internationally, national and internationally. So that's why Homeland Security is involved.
And she was a minor also. Because
But they wouldn't get involved just because she was a minor. No.
Okay. They got involved because of the different jurisdictional locations where these acts allegedly happened at.
And that's correct. And then she was able to, I can't say, allegedly she was able to tell them of girls who were underage at the time that she kept very good books and records that they should be able to look at and talk to, and those girls were not old enough.
Wow, she had the wherewithal to start keeping documentations of what was happening to her. Even though she didn't feel that she could leave after 2 years, 3 years, she waited 10 years, which is still something hard for the average person to believe. Why did she wait so long? Is it like a brainwashing type of situation that goes on? That the manipulator...
It's called the Stockholm Syndrome. And then once you feel that you are in fear of your life and you have seen this person order other things done and they were done, you're not going to try them. And that's what she did. She waited until the time that he didn't want her anymore, and she left. And she came back with all the information that she needed in order to get things done, allegedly.
Right. And so the R. Kelly situation is basically almost the same, when you hear about him allegedly urinating and then locking them. In fact, he held them at their will. He had held them against their will, rather. He held them against their will, locked them up in rooms, and outright, held them hostage and in bondage for sex. So that situation, people more can see that being a type of sex trafficking as opposed to the alleged P. Diddy situation. And that's why you have all these mixed feelings, that mixed comments that you see, and mixed feelings that you see, that you read about on the internet, because it becomes a situation more people can understand when a person is held against their will, like in the R. Kelly situation, as opposed to this young lady who was in this 10-year allegedly relationship. How could that have been sex trafficking? But we know now it's the Stockholm syndrome, where you basically kind of...
No.
That's not...
No, it's not just because it was the Stockholm syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It was sex trafficking, because he was telling her to have sex with people that he set up for her to have sex with.
Right.
She wasn't in a relationship that you saw. You saw her coming with him, holding hands and all that.
Right.
But he was in relationships with several people at that same time.
Okay, all right. So that was a facade. That was a manipulator.
Exactly.
That was what the statute would call, what's the word for it? A fraud. That was a fraud, a perpetrated on the world, pretty much. Because you know what a fraud is, the intentional misrepresentation of what's going on. So by him having this young lady out there holding her hand and seeming like she's living the life of Riley here, he's actually behind the scenes manipulating her. And that would have to be a really sinister type of person that would do those type of things.
For so long, yes.
For so long. Do you know whether or not any of these people or these traffickers have been examined for their psychological well-being or psychological mind? Like, something got to be a missing link. We call it missing.
No, I mean, P. Diddy is not the first. We have the Prince, who was caught up in the sex trafficking ring. We have the president and owner of the Patriots, New Orleans Patriots. We have priests. We have police chief. We have rabbis, all caught up in this. There's so many other people involved. Predators don't look like somebody who's doing something wrong. The guy who sexually exploited different girls, who was a coach, and watching them to take showers and sell it online because everybody is into this OnlyFans thing. There are a lot of people who you think are normal who are not normal, and they are doing these different things. You don't have to check them out psychotically, but this is what they want. This is what they prefer.
As it relates to DJ Kid, was there any evidence or anything where he actually was selling them, or because from my understanding, he was just bragging about what he's done with these young girls. And he had them out there. Initially, he baited them in with to sell these flyers for him. And his defense is probably the worst defense in the world, because he dealt with minors, kids. His defense is that I gave them gifts. They accepted that they were, of age. And so I believed them, and I had a relationship with them. They were my girlfriends. So how do you have 700 or 693 girlfriends in a 3-year period where you're exploiting them?
Because you are a DJ in the underprivileged community as the Black community, and you go in there and you are able to get young girls to come backstage when other rapper or artists come to town, and you are able to sell them and let them have sex with those artists that are coming to your area. And you not only do that, you film yourself and sell it on a Backpage website, or what is it called? The sex website, where no one sees anything, and it's just you with your face covered, and you're having sex in different ways with these young girls, and you're getting off on this. Not only that, the young girls that you're having sex with, they are minors. So these girls are not mentally developed, and he was targeting those girls, and he would buy them cheap clothing. I've seen the pictures. I have the pictures.
What?
That he would buy them clothes and say, put on this, and then tell them how beautiful they look. And he would take explicit pictures of them in whatever he told them to put on, and with his hand or mouth or whatever, their hand or mouth somewhere, and he would take these pictures. So how he got away with them making a plea deal with such limited amount of numbers, 5 to 10 girls, instead of what he had been doing this in that community for over 10 years. And not only that, he had children by some of these girls.
What? I know I read where he had given one of them HIV.
Exactly. And he didn't give one, he gave several.
He gave several. And this is, he's just one person doing all these things to these young Black minor girls. And that's unrealistic that they did not use the federal statute, which he should have gotten life into prison because it carries a maximum up to life. This is a situation where the evidence is out there because he bragged about it and recorded it. He should have been charged under that federal statute, that trafficking statute enacted back in 2020, where he should have at least got more than 19 years because he started off getting 30 and it got reduced for whatever reason to 19 years. But do you find...
You know whose son he is, right?
No, whose son is that? Does it matter? But whose son is that?
Yeah, it matters because that's why he got the lenient sentence that he got.
And whose son is that?
It's another opportunity for privilege. They tried to say that he is just like those Black girls he used, that he had a 504 plan and an EIP.
When you say 504 plan and an EIP, are you talking about they're mentally challenged? Is that what
Exactly. Exactly. Their learning level and development for school.
I'll just say, when you say 504 and IEP, you mean that they're mentally challenged or have limited mentality.
Exactly. They have limited mentality and understanding. So he tried to play the courts, and the reason why his trial kept getting pushed back, because his family, which is his father is Ric Flair, the #1 champion wrestler player, that they were saying that he didn't have the mental capacity to stand trial, that he didn't understand what he was being charged with.
Oh, wow. Come on now. And I'm glad.
Look it up.
I'm glad it didn't work to a certain degree where he actually didn't get any time when people were able to prove that they're not guilty by reason of insanity. He tried to do the insanity plea, which is crazy because he full well knew what he was doing with these girls. He bragged about it. And for him to use that as a defense, saying, I'm just like them, and so I didn't know what I was doing, that's ridiculous. And that's ridiculous that the court system used that. If they based their sentencing on that, and that got him the reduction instead of life. Now, if that were white girls and a Black man did it, he would have been getting life. In the maximum of that statute would have been what he would have gotten as his sentencing, and it would be.
And it wouldn't matter. He got a little bit of time for after he got the little bit of time for what he did for 6 to 9 girls. He also got a limited listing as a sex offender for only 6 or 9 years instead of for the rest of his life.
I know. In most jurisdictions, in most states, once you get on that sexual offender list, you're on there for life. I read that. I couldn't believe that. I thought that was some type of special law that they had in South Carolina. But they're just treating him as a privileged person because of who his family is, which is ridiculous because it shouldn't matter who you are, because they showed us that it shouldn't matter the way they treated P. Diddy. They rated this house, like I said earlier, as he was public enemy #1, and we were only talking about a small number of girls, where this white guy, who is DJ Kid, went out there and sex trafficking and abused all these minor girls. That's ridiculous. The community should have been in uproar about that. But because it's a limited discussion in the community and people don't keep up with it, and people are not knowing basically what's going on, no one protests against it, because I know that there are some agencies out there that would have been out there saying, wait a minute, what has he done to these poor girls? And he preyed upon poor girls too. Poor black.
And I mean, and they were in a poor neighborhood as well. So everybody thought he was the white god. So those girls who got an opportunity to be with him, they thought they were getting something. P. Diddy, he was exploited.
John P. Diddy Combs, even though what he did, he alleged to have done, is wrong. So there you see the disparities in the so-called legal system, because I don't call it a justice system. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And like I said, justice is only good as the people that you put in office. So you got people over here that's running, amok, treating this man over here, P. Diddy Combs, and then you got a system out of South Carolina that says, okay, we're just going to give you a slap on the back because these were little poor black girls. Nobody don't care about them. Nobody's going to get in the uproar about them. But we need to get in the uproar about that because that's ridiculous. We need to stay in the uproar about these sex trafficking situations that's going on in America. And it's
the sexual exploitation that's going on in America, that a black person can't get a record deal unless they're talking about butt and tits and calling somebody a hoe. Right. And we're the only race that is allowed to do that.
And that's terrible. And that's awful, because that's a bad reflection on all of us when we can't get our community together to say enough is enough. So once we can get a grip and a handle on that, as it relates to demeaning black women, black girls, if we can't get a grip on that, then we're gonna continue to see sex trafficking going on, which is not good for America, not good for the country. In fact, it's an economic and a national security problem.
It's a crisis right now. It's a blown out crisis, especially for women of color. Right now, we're missing at an alarming rate. It's almost 189,000 missing black women and girls in the United States. And that's just a little number. That number has not really moved since the second time they took stats. They have not done and redone that number yet, because the number is alarming. And the black women and girls and minority are getting exploited within their own communities, and other people online who know how to exploit them are getting away with it as well.
Let me ask you, do you see sex trafficking more prevalent in the black community than in the white community?
Honey, it's already known. It's noted. The FBI in its stats, look at it. The most trafficked people in America is a woman of color.
Right.
There is 40 in some areas. Let's talk about New Orleans. New Orleans 1 year was 82% of all trafficking victims were African American. Los Angeles was 92% 1 year. All victims were African American. In our state of South Carolina, they say it's 45% of all victims are African American. How do you know that when you never take African American mothers serious when they say their child is missing and they want them back, and yet you refuse to put them on television or anything else? You tell them, oh, she ran away, so she'll be back. How can you say that number is exact?
See, that's another part of an unjust system going on. When we first started talking, you said that there were some bodies missing. You have not been able to find 4 or 5 victims, 5 women that are victims of sex trafficking. Can you just tell me?
No. They're not victims of sex trafficking. All 5 of these women are victims of domestic violence.
Wow. Okay, they've been abused.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Before we close out, we never did get the distinction between sex trafficking and pimping.
Okay, sex trafficking, as I said, it has to be a person under the age of 18 being sold as a commercial sex. Pimping is a woman who's out here on her own and decide that this is her legal profession and she wants a pimp in order to protect her while she's out there on the street. we're finding that some of the women that we're finding out on the street, they have been on the street since they were 16, and they didn't understand that they were being trafficked and not being a prostitute for pimping. The most time when law enforcement runs up on a Black girl who's on the street and she's underage, instead of her being treated as a victim in which she is, 56% of the time, and this is according to FBI status, 56% of the time, she's locked up as a prostitute instead of finding who is standing by that is pimping her to be out there.
Wow, wow. We have a lot of work to do. Much work.
We have a whole lot of work to do.
Right. We're going to have you again because this is a very much needed discussion. And thank you for being with us here today to at least try to get it started. And maybe we're onto something about getting this, making the public more aware of sex trafficking and how it's affecting the Black community, Black women, young girls, how we are being exploited, and how we as a community has turned a deaf ear to what's going on in the situation, because we have to get out there as a community and cry foul, because apparently no one else is going to do it, because it has to start here at home. I look forward to getting back with you to continue our discussion on sex trafficking. And I just want to say, if you are or believe someone is involved in sex trafficking or trafficking, call 1-888-373-7888. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline toll free. The number that I just gave, which is 1-888-373-7888. The anti-trafficking hotline advocates are available 24/7 to take your reports of potential human trafficking. And remember, there are people out there that would help you get away from those type of situations. If you know something, say something. If you see something, say something. Well, please, let's stop trafficking our Black girls. Please.